This is More Than Money with Mapalo Makhu, brought to you by Sasfin Wealth.
Welcome to More Than Money. I'm Mapalo Makhu, a personal finance columnist, and I love having money conversations that change people's perspective about finances. Why am I doing this podcast, you might ask? To talk about money. Not the paper stuff. I mean the baggage, the feeling, the emotional, heart-wrenching stuff. We find this conversation so uncomfortable to have, which is why on this podcast, I have decided to have this very difficult conversations. We are going to have some difficult discussions because better money conversations lead to better money confidence, and healthy money dialogue leads to healthy money decisions. Today, my guest is Manjula Naidoo, and she is an experienced wealth advisor with a CFP. Manjula, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. Have you always imagined yourself in this industry when you were growing up?
No, actually not at all. My first degree or education starts with public relations. I've always had a passion for that, and that's where I started in public relations.
So from public relations all the way to finance, how did that happen?
Look, it's economical as well. So I completed my public relations studies and, got married, had a baby girl who yesterday turned 24.
Wow.
And I was just at home for a while and, the job market was tight. And then I got a position as a temp, really. That's how it all started for a independent financial advisor in Durban. And that's where it began. And over time, I just grew to love what I was doing and realized I had all the right tools in place and, I was developing the skills, and then it just took off from there. And I think the part that sort of interlinks both public relations as well as financial planning or advisory is our willingness to help clients and the interaction with the clients as well as the greater audience. And that's how it started.
When you went, let's say, maternity leave, what were your thoughts around that? Did you and your partner decide, okay, we're going to stay at home? Was there some sort of a plan? How did you go about that transition?
23 years ago, things were a lot different from the way they are now. And, you could actually have decided to be a stay-at-home mom. But I think for me, it was really important that in order for us to have a different life, a better life, there would need to be two salaries. And that's how it started, how we went about budgeting for something like this, because I remember it's not easy when you have such a limited pool in terms of one person's salary, and then now you have an additional mouth to feed. So it becomes a necessity over time. And it was just a slow progression into that. What attracted me to becoming a financial advisor over time was the different people that I had exposure to, both from other advisors, the clients. And what I didn't realize, while I did accounting and maths in high school, was that I was really good at these things. So you tell yourself, look, I want to become a public relations specialist, and that's what it was, and I'm good at this. And people always said to me, oh, you have a good way of speaking at functions and things like that and events, and I loved organizing. So it kind of like you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to be great at a public relations officer. But then you realize, wow, when you do something else, that I'm actually good at it. And I think now, to put things in perspective, it's like when you watch MasterChef, for instance, right? And the people that participate have such varying careers. Like there's doctors that now are becoming chefs and attorneys or architects and engineers leaving their profession to do something that is cooking. And a lot of times people don't understand that, but it's about finding yourself. And you can't necessarily find yourself if you're limited in what you expose yourself to. I was very lucky to have been exposed to the financial planning industry at large and given the opportunities. And then, You just got to take the reins and you got to go for it.
What is the sort of advice you have given to your child around money as she becomes a young woman?
Well, I do have an 18-year-old son as well.
Yeah.
And I think for the longest time, my greatest passion is nurturing two young individuals. Like, I literally had these empty slates and, you could fill them with all the right kind of motivation, values, intrinsic skills as well. And I have to say that both the kids, they are money savvy and money smart. They also know the difference between luxury and necessities. And being in that, she's sort of at the late end of a millennial, and then my son is sort of Gen Z, I think it is. But both of them have respect for the money that you earn.
Yes.
And the money that you save. And both of them have goals. And I think money goals are really important.
Most people who deal with money or talk about money say that you must respect money. But what does that actually look like in practice?
Wow, that's a loaded question, right? Because for so many people, respecting money could mean so many different things. And you see it every day. I think the main thing is if you respect for every rand that you earn and every rand that you save, you realize that compounding effect over time means that you're able to live your best life. And that's what the respect is. And, not to spoil themselves unnecessarily. But I think that's where it comes from is, if you take cell phones, for instance, it's such a major part of everyone's life at the moment. And that's on a planet level, right? To two young individuals like them, you have to make sense that in order to buy the best kind of cell phone, you need to have the money in order to do that. And the respect comes from how you manage your data, how you manage your calls, how you respect the phone itself as a product, as an asset in so many ways.
Yes.
And for me, I think their respect for money comes from the fact that they know that they can take any cent or any rand and make it more. And if they use it, for instance, in their path to attaining an education, like my daughter currently is studying her master's and she's doing it in Luxembourg. And that is because she saved money and she has respect for what money can give her.
What would you say has been your worst financial mistake so far?
My worst regret or my biggest regret is the fact that I wasted so much of money and time and effort buying things that I actually did not need. I used to do a bit of modeling back in my day as well. And so the love for clothes, bags, and shoes and everything matching and the accessories. And you know what? I have a mantra now that I do not waste money because, it made no sense to me. Why did I need to have a bag for every outfit and a shoe for every outfit? And I think COVID has also taught us this because one of the pleasures that I had was my husband gifted me a shoe cupboard, a double door, 4-layer shoe cupboard.
Oh my word, that must be heaven.
I know. I even had design input where I designed, the level at the bottom big enough for boots and so on. And you know what? Every time I look at that cupboard and I think to myself, oh my word, the amount of money that could have been saved. And then I have to ask myself, what was I really trying to do? Because that's what it is. When people do certain things like that, you're trying to actually fill a gap. You're filling a need.
Yeah.
And that's what I've said to my kids. Buy essential items, buy good quality. So if you need to spend 1,000 rand to buy a good quality leather bag and you just need one leather bag, then that's your goal. When I reflect back on what I tell my clients all the time and, the advice that we give, it's called budgeting and, spending wisely and saving wisely. I think I practice all of that now, but gosh, I wish that somebody had this, conversation with me. And maybe the point is, mental health issues. And that's where the two start coming together is that are we addressing mental health issues correctly? Because then at the end of the day, somewhere down the line, you actually start making better financial decisions as well.
You mentioned something very interesting, and that's where I always start when I talk about finances, is that what is it that you're trying to feel? What is that void? For you, when you reflected on your life, what was that thing that you were trying to feel?
Look, I think at that stage, it was a feeling that I wasn't good enough. We live in a world where women do struggle. You can have everything at your fingertip, but at the same time, you find that you're just not good enough. It was a strange thing because when you look at me and, everybody that speaks to me and, the feedback I get from other people is like, oh, you're so positive. But at that time, I was a new mom.
Yeah.
I was traveling long hours to get to work, and you're trying to juggle a career. You're now educating yourself in something different, and then you're striving to make strides in your job at the same time. I was just running myself ragged. But I think the main thing is that I just felt that I wasn't good enough. And that came down to exactly it. It was a self-esteem thing, but in a different way. And I just didn't have the confidence to say, I am worthy, I am good enough, and I can do this, and I have all the skills in place. So I think over time, what I have done is I've taken quite a lot of time to introspect, to look at myself and understand the greatest thing we can do to ourselves is accept the things you can change and accept the things you can't change, because we are limited.
Do you remember what you did with your first paycheck when you were a financial advisor?
My first salary as a financial advisor was not even 5,000 Rand. I was like, wow, how am I going to make this month work? I had to pay the essentials, which was the bond, make sure my life assurances were all paid because you have a young child, you had debt, and then you got to make sure that in the event something happens, you're still covered. Yeah, and I think I actually did go and spoil myself with a bag, to be honest. Like they said before, you get paid on the 25th and then by the 30th, there is no money left, and then you just struggle again.
How do you get over the fear of living from paycheck to paycheck? Then secondly, how did you get out of that red race, if you can call it?
It took a while, but I also think it came a lot from reading and investing in myself. It's not like an aha moment where you suddenly wake up one day and you realize, oh my goodness, this is how I'm going to change and I'm going to do things. But I think what it was over time, I realized what the priorities were. And, strangely enough, I literally drew a circle and I started just setting life goals for myself, in education, in travel, in what I want for my children's education, where they're going to study. And literally, it's a circle. And I reflect back on it now, on what I had written there. And I'm so glad it was my plan. It was my life plan, basically. And that changed things, because then you realized I now had 2 kids and I needed to do things differently. I was also learning at the same time from my clients. I took the learning that I had, my studies, and it wasn't just studying for other people and for me to apply what I've learned to other people. I needed to apply it to myself. Otherwise, I'm not being authentic. I'm not being real. And how can I then say to somebody else that I'm an advisor, but I don't practice what I preach? That's a massive shift in mindset. And even today, it's living with an intentional mindset.
You are listening to More Than Money, a podcast collaboration brought to you by Sasfin Wealth. At Sasfin Wealth, we empower our clients to reach their global investment goals, to retire with dignity, and to leave a lasting legacy. If you would like to have real money conversations, visit sasfin.com/wealth and talk to us. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
How does one get over that fear of, you know what, I can see that things are not great right now with my finances, but I don't know where to start?
For me, it was one day at a time, and it started with analyzing how I was bleeding money every month. And I love spreadsheets, and I have a massive spreadsheet that details every single thing that goes in and comes out. The who, the what, the when, the why, and how as well. putting that into a spreadsheet and then holding myself accountable and deciding I am paying this off and I'm cutting the card and I'm never going back down that line. That's literally how it started. And I realized something else. I needed to be a good example for my children as well as others that I could impact. Even my husband, and having a conversation with my daughter's friend regarding her RA. Those are things that also sort of over time have impacted how I changed my ways. It was painful where I'm moving towards a zero waste lifestyle as well. And I think it's because I do have two young children, and you realize that in order for them to have longevity in their lives, we've got to make our little mark and try and do changes. But those things also came into play in the greater scheme of things. The idea to reduce, to recycle and reuse has money impacts to it as well.
So now, looking at where you are now and all that you've learned, do you still have some fears around money?
Oh, for sure. I don't think, anyone can say that they don't have a fear, even though you could have everything in place. The natural fear is just there. For me, at this current stage, I think my greatest fear is, do I have and will we have enough for our retirement? Because again, what we see on such a daily basis is that there's so many individuals in South Africa that just do not have sufficient money saved in order to retire. One of the things that I do tell clients when I have an opportunity to speak to them is the best thing you could do in terms of post-retirement planning is aim to be financially independent of your children. And that's what I want to strive for. And, that's the kind of fear is that, are we going to be able to do this? You and I as financial advisors, we already have the skills and tools in place. We understand the industry, we understand, funds and management and so on. But imagine the person on the street and the people that do not have this education and the experience or the guidance.
What would you say to someone who is about to retire and is feeling very anxious?
Look, I do have a client in a position like that at the moment, provided a snapshot of what his current circumstances are and very much fearful of what is to come. So many money gurus will say, if you start saving at 25, you're going to have this much. And if you save at 35, you've lost out on so many years, and 45. And here you have an individual now at like 65. And you've got to say to them that we're going to work together. Firstly, we're going to apply all that we can into this plan. But it begins with a plan. You've got to plan correctly using a very holistic view. And then at the same time, we've got to stick to the plan. You've got to say to yourself, we're going to stick with this plan and it's going to be to our benefit, because that's the main thing, is where we've got to be rational in our thinking and we've got to take the emotion out of the equation for the various clients. And you just got to give them the confidence to know that, listen, we've planned correctly, we're going to do this, but it means that we've got to partner together in order to get this done. And that's where, over time, the schooling and the confidence builds up, and you have clients that will then say, yes, this is your area of expertise, and I'm going to actually partner with you, and we're going to get this done, and we're going to have enough money for the next 30 years. Everything's going to be fine. But it's hard work.
And I love the fact that, you don't shy away from saying getting your finances right does take work.
Oh, it's hard work. It's like being married.
Through the different curveballs, you still say, okay, the plan is this.
And something else is very important for clients that are in that post-retirement phase is that they've got to take time annually to reflect on what is going on. It's not just creating the plan, but it's also each year to check to see that everything's in place, what is changed, has your circumstances changed? And we've got to be able to say, sit down and have that meeting and say, okay, Are we making changes to the plan, or are we adapting certain things? Have you realized certain things as well? Because it's an education as well. So if you could be 65 and yet a younger financial advisor can still teach you how to manage your money in post-retirement phase differently. You might not have thought about it. So I
Yeah.
think the annual review process as well, especially for clients that are in that post-retirement phase, is so critical because it's an opportunity for the client as well as the advisor to have a very honest reflection of what is going on.
So now we've spoken a little bit about post-retirement. What about those people who are pre-retirement and they're young and they just started out in their career and retirement seems like such a far off thing? And of course, taking into consideration that the cost of living is becoming higher and higher and people are feeling the pinch. So what do you say to someone who thinks, yeah, I still have time?
The reality with that is that you find so many young people are struggling. Like you said, they have a limited salary and their expenses continually increasing all the time. And then everybody wants an entertainment budget in their salary at the end of the month as well. I have to say, it's a very difficult conversation to convince somebody that retiring at age 65, and if you're 25, you got to start now. So many financial gurus, I think YouTube as well, has started to change younger people's views because that's what they have first. Social media is their biggest call about retirement and savings and so on. And I have been doing some research on this, and I found that there are lots of young people that are going online and on social media and promoting that, yes, if you save and you do these things, A, B, and C, when you finally retire, you're going to have this lump sum and it's going to help you. But reality doesn't always work that way. And I think when I speak to somebody, there's a few questions that you start off with. And the main thing is, what is your example of retirement from a personal perspective? And then you'll find that they have an uncle that retired and that uncle doesn't have sufficient money. So now they're doing consulting work or they're still trying to find work and they into their maybe late 60s as well. And I think that is where you start from. It sounds negative, but you instill a little bit of fear in them. The fear that they're not going to have enough capital because they don't want to be that person. They don't want to be that aunt, the uncle, their dad, their mom that's going to say, I'm struggling. I don't have enough to retire with. I've worked so many years and it's still not enough. Now we have more examples of that. And it's true. You have young people that actually come to you and say, you know what? I don't want to be in this situation. I want to start saving. The other question, I have had several young people that are now looking at options to leave the country, work elsewhere. And then when they're doing that, they say, oh, no, I'm busy doing that. I don't need to save to an RA, or I have a employer provident fund, but I'm leaving my employer and I don't want to preserve it. So the idea is that you've got to say to them, the provident fund money that you had, right, is just a start. That's your capital base. You didn't have it before. Don't count it as property now, or as liquidity, cash liquidity that you're going to use.
Yeah.
Instead, think of it as something that you don't have access to and just forget about it. Put it in a preservation and just forget about it. That's one of the things that I would say is it's like bonuses. These young people, you get a bonus, you get an increase. It's something that we applied to ourselves. Is every year you never had that increased amount of salary. You never had that bonus. So just continue thinking you don't have it and put it away in a RA, and that's how it starts. And it gives them a kind of pleasure. So it's fear as well as rewarding yourself. So it's saying, imagine that you continue on this basis. And, this is where financial plans come into play as well. Even pre-retirement, it's so significant when you can show somebody in black and white their financial plan and say to them, even if you're just saving 500 Rand, 500 Rand now over the next 20 to 30 years or 35 years, this is what it's going to grow to. And that's promising. So I think fear, accomplishment, and promise makes a big difference.
For me, I've seen where 5 years ago I started with someone and I told them, just keep on investing, just keep on investing. The first 2 years, they're like, what am I doing here? But in 5 years' time, they've been prudent, they've built that habit, and now they start seeing some sort of results and they start getting excited. So just give it time as well, I think, is very important.
Oh, definitely time. And I'm so pleased you mentioned habits because I totally live by Stephen Covey's 7 habits, where, my favorite is begin with the end in mind. Form those habits early on and it stays with you.
Manjula, thank you so much. I have one last question for you. Talking about habits, what is the one habit that you think has been good for you throughout your career and managing your finances?
I would say sharpening the saw. So, what that means is continually educating myself. I don't think, for me, reading and education is the two priorities in life. Whether you're 65, 25, or like me, 48, it still has so much value. So, I continue to sharpen that saw.
Absolutely. Continuous learning, very important. That was Manjula Naidoo. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was a Sasfin Wealth podcast. Visit sasfin.com/wealth for more information.